Assalamu alaikum. So we're here on the Muslim Street, bringing you another hard-hitting show. We'll be discussing Venezuela. We're going to go there in a second. But before we do, we just want to do a little house cleaning. I want to thank the Lance Scurr Show producing us out of Accra, Ghana. Is up, Lance? And I got to say, Lance, it is very good to say that we're being produced out of the motherland. You understand what I'm saying? I just want to give you a shout out. And you can find him on the Lance Scurr Show across all social platforms. We're at the Muslim Street, www.themuslimstreet.com. I am your host, Malik Aziz, the editor-in-chief of the Muslim Street. I'm joined by Dr. Viper Issa White, who is the author of Blacklisted, The Price for Speaking the Truth. Pick up the book, guys. Go to Amazon, order the book, click on it right now. Spend a few dollars. How much is your book, brother? How much is the book, Dr. White? I don't think you can hear me. Anyway, probably.
Yes.
How much is the book?
The book is $30 easy.
$30. That's 6 trips to Starbucks when you've been wasting your money on that garbage. We're also joined by Art Mobley of the Balfour Trust, also one of the founding members of the National Association of Black Journalists. We will be discussing in depth the situation of the United States government's attempted overthrow of the Venezuelan government over the weekend. It seems like every week we're talking about Donald Trump, who ran on no more wars, no more regime changes. We literally saw him since he took presidency in late January involved either directly or by proxy in 8 different wars around the globe. Amazing, right? Right to the stratosphere and standard operating procedure of the neocons, or those never Trumpers who try to keep him out of office. So we have seen this playbook before. You guys, settle down. This is nothing new. This is the way that the United States government operates, operated like that for quite some time, just short of 100 years. But if we look at the year Africa, as the world began to throw off colonial rule and colonial domination in the 1950s and 1960s, we saw in 1953 by the CIA an overthrow of a democratically elected government in Iran, Mohammed Mossadegh, and they placed the Shah of Iran as a puppet in power that lasted all the way until the late 1970s. We also saw the year Africa happen in 1960. 2/3 of the African continent threw off colonialism and got their independence. Right away, what happens? Patrice Lumumba in the Congo is assassinated, his government overthrown. Kwame Nkrumah, a few years later, while he's visiting Chairman Mao in China, his government is overthrown. Moving forward to the late 1980s, and Thomas Sankara in Burkina Faso, coup d'etat backed by the United States and France. We saw Amilcar Cabral in Guinea-Bissau assassinated by the CIA. Samora Machel in Mozambique assassinated during a plane crash, which is a motor operation that the CIA used during the Cold War in order to destabilize that government. Needless to say, under the Obama administration, Muammar Gaddafi in 2011, assassinated by the United States government, led CIA action under President Obama and Hillary Clinton. Also, we can go back to the 1980s with Maurice Bishop, independent leader of Grenada, who only wanted to build resources for the Grenadian people, wouldn't go along with the American scheme, and he was executed during a coup d'etat in the early 1980s. We hosted Michael Manley, president of Jamaica, affectionately known as Joshua of his people, overthrown by the CIA and replaced by a man by the name of Edward Seaga, also known as Edward C. Aga. Fidel Castro, if we go back to the late 1950s, during the Cuban Revolution, he was there was over 12 attempted assassinations by the CIA on Fidel Castro. The Black movement in the United States, we face since the launch of COINTELPRO, the disruption of Black organizations and political assassinations, going back to honeycombed, infested Nation of Islam by the FBI and the assassination of Malcolm X. We saw the hit on Dr. King, Fred Hampton. We covered that on Muslim Street. In 1969 in December in Chicago, an FBI assassination of Chairman Fred Hampton, and of course, the Black Liberation Army during the late 1960s, early 70s, with people like Sundiata Acoli, Daroud Ben Wahad, who we had on the Muslim Street, the Panther 21, along with Assata Shakur, who were in prison illegally, and we were able to bust Assata Shakur out, and she took refuge under the Fidel Castro and the Cuban Revolution, and she lived out her life in Havana, Cuba. So this is the context of regime change, the taking of resources, and the destabilization of movements historically by Black and brown people, historically by the United States government, an oppressive regime. Dr. White, what do you say?
Yes, absolutely, Brother Malik. Your rendition of history and covert and overt exercises was very well done. You're a tremendous historian and scholar. But absolutely, you're right. What has taken place now in reference to Venezuela is that the United States has officially has become an imperialist empire. Although we have said this before, but it is official now. That is, President Trump violates every international law of a sovereign state. He lied to the American people that Venezuela was a threat. There's no serious threat to our country from Venezuela, by no means. He goes in, he kills at least 130 fishermen, primarily fishermen, off the shores of Venezuela, as well as other nationals. Then he goes in last night, dropping pillars of bombs into the three major states and killing several people that we hear are coming out now. Then he goes in and kidnaps, not arrest. He kidnaps someone and brings them, a president, and brings them to the United States to be on trial. This is very similar to what they did to Noriega and Panama in the 1980s. The point here is that the United States do not believe in sovereignty and doesn't believe in international law only when it benefits our country. And I would not just say it's Trump, because we see all of them doing these things. It's just that Trump is doing it in a bombastic case with the Bush, with the Clintons, with the Obamas, and so forth. The sad thing in Florida, that's where I live, and we have the largest Venezuelan population in the country.
You're breaking up bad.
Both groups are running down the street, even in my own city of Orlando, waving flags and honoring this type of activity, which is a shame, because the majority of Americans, over 70%, did not agree with what has taken place. So then we have congressmen and senators, and I'm speaking of Florida, on no side of the aisle, Republican or Democrat, has overtly condemned these actions. The Republicans are all in favor. The Democrats are saying it should have been consulted first, but they also agree with the fact that the president of Venezuela was a bad guy, a drug pusher, and all of these things. And all these things are just not true. So it shows you that our country has degraded into a state of lawlessness. And one final moment. With the Venezuelan action, it has cost the United States just from last night, but from all the ships they have throughout the Caribbean and off the shores of Venezuela, over $100 million. Over $100 million. And this is in light of the fact that that money could have been used in helping the infrastructure, the poor, the homeless, the hungry, the despair in our own country. But we use that money on war, violence, and the apprehension of a state. And the last thing, one last thing, I think it's ludicrous that the president stated that we are going to be able to control and take over and run the state of Venezuela. We have a hard enough time running our own state, called the United States of America, much less a country like Venezuela. So
Yeah.
it was a sad day for America, sad day for democracy, sad day for the world.
Yeah. So, Art, on that point of Donald Trump declaring that the United States government, an imperialist entity, that the empire is going to literally take over Venezuela and run it, from Washington D.C. is laughable. I asked a question to someone earlier. I said two things. What happens if Donald Trump is arrested and taken into custody? Who becomes president? J.D. Vance. Am I right? Well, they act as if out of this
Yes.
Western arrogance that no other country has any kind of pecking order or infrastructure to answer, these situations like this. So Venezuela, Maduro and his wife were arrested. Venezuela has an acting president, and it's not the puppet that the Trump administration and CIA wants to select. The recent Nobel Peace Prize winner, who was a lackey of the Zionist project in Israel. But her name is Delcy Rodriguez. And she says today, Art, she accused Israel of being behind the U.S. operation that led to the capture of the ousted president, Nicolas Maduro, calling the strike on Caracas a Zionist, and adding that the Maduro remains the country's only legitimate president.
Well, we can't overlook that democracy is the reigning force in Venezuela. Hugo Chavez was popularly elected back in 1998. And this is just a continuation of that democratic movement to govern Venezuela in accordance with the laws of that country, international law, but most importantly, it is the people's will and the people's law that will prevail. It is an act of desperation for the U.S. to have done what they did, certainly desperate for several reasons we'll get to in a moment, but to answer and face your question, Malik, and also Dr. White's observations. This attack was not only dastardly, but as I mentioned, it was an act of desperation. The U.S. in the face of Donald Trump is desperate, totally desperate to make moves that will impress his base, whether it's the MAGA base or in this case, the base of oil companies that want to control the Venezuelan oil resources and want to move in that direction. The strikes that hit Venezuela in the wee hours of yesterday morning not only struck Maduro's compound, but struck several military bases, and they even blew up the mausoleum for Hugo Chavez. They blew up his gravesite. So this was very calculated to be very devastating to the people of Venezuela and people around the world, is a threat to say, we can go in, and Donald Trump has repeated this several times since this misguided foolery that we saw yesterday, but he keeps insinuating that we can go in anytime, anywhere, and take out anybody that we want to. And that's the intimidation part of this scenario. So it's going to come back to haunt the U.S. in a very, very strident way. The Venezuelan people are in the streets. They're going to have their way. Maduro may not be released. He may be held in the U.S. until they can take him to trial. But in the meantime, Venezuela has a parliament. They have a vice president. They have a governmental structure that will be able to continue and move forward. So that's my brief opening capsule.
Yeah. Dr. White, you talked about the Venezuela diaspora who are in the United States.
Yes.
Can you do a historical comparison to quote unquote Cuban refugees in the fallout of the Cuban Revolution under Fidel Castro, who ended up in Miami, vis-a-vis the Venezuelans who are down there right now? Do a historical comparison of them from a class perspective, so that the audience can understand who we're talking about. And also, if you can expand on that and do a comparative understanding or analysis of the 80% Afro-Cubans who stayed under the revolution, and the Venezuelans who are on the ground in Venezuela saying, America, if you come in here, you're going to be another Vietnam.
Absolutely. During the Batista regime of Cuba, Cuba was a segregated state. The poor people received nothing. They had no ownership. There was unemployment. There was prostitution. It was a degenerate state that was allowed to flourish under the leadership of Batista, who was no more than a puppet. So you have Fidel Castro. Fidel Castro, note, I mean, he came from a privileged class. His father was a plantation holder. When I say plantation holder, I mean he owned a big hacienda in Santiago de Cuba. But he saw that the blacks there, and remember, Cuba is primarily a black nation. He saw that the blacks there and other groups were being treated badly. They had no rights, they had no control, they had nothing. So he said, we must have a change. And he first tried to have a peaceful change. Then later on, they cracked down on him, ultimately sending him out of the country to Mexico, where he formalized his argument much stronger. Then he came back in to lead a revolution. The people who went to Miami after the revolution were primarily people of the bourgeoisie and the elite position. They were the physicians. They were the lawyers. They had the money. They were primarily the whites. Not primarily, they were all whites. And they're the ones who said, oh, terrible. He's taking care of things because he's doing terrible things. The same thing in Venezuela. Venezuela, under the puppet regime of the United States before Hugo Chavez, was a degenerate state again. The people were oppressed. The people were hurt. When Hugo came in, one of the first things he did, like Castro, was to nationalize the oil fields, nationalize the banks, nationalize the industries, which really means for the American people that the money that is made from these industries will be going back to the hands of the people. And so the people can live. They can have decent housing, decent education. They can have a life. In fact, if you go back to Cuba again, Cuba now, and within this hemisphere, has the second or the third best healthcare system in this hemisphere, and one of the best in the world. They send their doctors all over. They send their engineers all over. So they have flourished. So the people, the Venezuelans that's in Miami, that's in Fort Lauderdale, that's in Orlando, they hate what's taking place because they were privileged and they don't give a crying poop about the underclass. Now, the underclass in Venezuela are saying right now we're armed, we're ready, just like the rebels and the freedom fighters in Fidel Castro. You come here this time, we're going to be ready for you. And note, they would have been ready this time, but let me tell you something. That was a covert operation. All right. I mean, the United States through the CIA paid off a number of Venezuelan generals and leaders and gave out false orders that when the Americans came in to just drop your guns, just stand down. That's what the order was. There was no fire power between the Venezuelan armed forces and the Americans. It was just the Americans. So that's what the Americans have done. And they've been doing this for a number of years. It was planned. This has been an operation for at least 5 or 6 years. Donald Trump was just the one who pulled the trigger. All right. But they have been, it was a covert operation. And that's what it was. But now the people are ready. They're armed. The vice president, President Trump thought that she was going to punk out because he said, well, they're going to see what we're doing. So they're going to just punk out. But that vice president said no. Also what's taking place is that Brazil has mobilized their troops on the Venezuelan border in reference to the United States. Mexico has mobilized their troops. Colombia has mobilized their troops. All right. There is going to be a lot of fire taking place in Venezuela. And it's going to make Vietnam look like a Sunday school picnic because the United States has put themselves in a position that freedom fighters are rising up. And the United States has to put troops there. They're going to have to put people on the ground to push the order. And it's not going to work. They're going to be sitting ducks. You watch and see.
September 11th, 1973, Salvador Allende and the government of Chile, the president of Chile, was overthrown by a CIA-backed Augusto Pinochet. There was a focus on, at least going back a decade with Castro and the Cuban Revolution, a focus on Central and South America and the Caribbean for this whole control of the activity down there, the resources, and under the guise of, we want to stop the flow of communism in this hemisphere. How different is this with just last week, we saw Trump going to Nigeria to engage the real world around the Sahel states. We saw a week before that, the government, the illegal government of Israel, go in and announce that Somaliland is a nation so they can engineer on behalf of their proxy, the United States government, to control over the waterways and trade routes in Eastern Africa. Whereas before there was a focus on just a central area, now is this just like a whole wide world takeover of imperialism?
Well, I think it's, again, acts of desperation. And what we're seeing now, as opposed to what happened back with Pinochet and Castro that long ago. And you might remember that right before the CIA attempted and went in to pull off their coup, Fidel Castro visited Allende and gave him a helmet and a AK-47 and said, hey, you're going to have to defend yourself because they're going to come after you. And this is symbolic of what we're saying here and what Dr. White was saying about arming the people in your prospective country to protect your revolution. If you don't do that, then you run the risk of what happened the other night in Venezuela. How does the U.S. military linger off the coast on all of these aircraft carriers and battleships and submarines and what have you out there, an armada of nonsense, and come into Venezuela, Caracas, in the dead of night and be able to successfully move in, hit all of the targets that they want to hit, and break into the presidential compound and steal the president. At the same time, you're hitting and trying to strike that chain of command so that you're decapitating the entire machinery of Venezuela so that it can't operate going forward. How do they do that? How does that happen without at least someone on the ground falling asleep at the switch? Now, I'm not going to try to get into anyone's head or presuppose that any particular scenario happened, because we don't have that information. The only thing we can do is to speculate. But that was an astounding feat, and one that, I'm sure prompted Donald Trump to gloat as he did so arrogantly, in the press conference yesterday. But again, this was an act of desperation. It is short-lived. It is going to be certainly a cautionary tale for the people of Venezuela, and they're going to be ready going forward. It also will cause countries around the world to be more defensive, whether they be in Latin America or Africa. We have to understand that this targeting of Venezuela was a bellwether moment for all countries in Latin America, including countries like Cuba. Mexico is on a short list, Colombia. Right. And essentially, Donald Trump issued these threats. This isn't just something that I'm thinking. This is what Donald Trump said. So they're actually flagging.
Not only there, but remember, he also stated last week that we should even go into Greenland.
Right. Well, that's a whole nother area, but in a whole nother political dynamic. But right. Just sticking with where we are, Cuba is a target. Cuba, of course, would be the prize if they could go in and do in Cuba what they did in Venezuela. They'd be turning backflips and somersaults and doing the Rubio dance. I mean, Donald Trump the other day got so carried away that he called it the instead of the Monroe Doctrine, he called it the Donroe Doctrine. The Donroe Doctrine.
Yeah, Dr. White. You mentioned earlier about the great Hugo Chavez. Early 2000s, I think around 2003, during the first George Bush administration, there was a CIA attempt to overthrow his government, right?
Yes.
Hugo Chavez, whom came out of the spirit of Fidel Castro and Che Guevara, this type of leadership in Central and South America was eventually destabilized. But one point I want to make about Hugo Chavez, I have to make this point about this global revolution of the proletariat, and that is that he literally wanted to fund with oil and gas stations throughout the United States, the Black movement. He literally was signing contracts to do this. A true revolutionary move. But I want to go back to Hugo Chavez. You talked about Trump and this latest caper and the tomfoolery that went in with desecrating the grave of Hugo Chavez. Do you know that every December 4th, 1969 is when they assassinated Chairman Fred Hampton on the west side of Chicago. Every December 4th since then, Dr. White, the Chicago Police Department, who assassinated him on behalf of the state's attorney's office, on behalf of the FBI, literally goes to his grave and they shoot his grave up. They literally shoot his gravestone up, right? So when you mention that, the comparison to this type of tomfoolery just is incredible, and they're really trying to send a message that you're not to martyr these worthy revolutionaries.
Absolutely. Before I want to get into that, just quickly, I just want to make mention you made something about oil. People don't know that Citgo oil is owned by Venezuela. And when Hugo Chavez was alive, we were going through an oil crunch and a cold spell within the United States. And he made available cheap oil, kerosene, to Black communities throughout the country. People need to know that. All right. And that was very, very instrumental and very, very good. He understood the relationship of the Black movement along with the geopolitical movement that's taking place in Venezuela. Yes, the whole element, the United States always wants to destroy the martyr. They don't want you to have a martyr. They want to leave a message. For example, when they, just like the Belgians, just like the French, when they kill or assassinate someone, they cut them up, throw their pieces all over the place, disintegrate the body. They do things like this because they're creating an atmosphere, a generational atmosphere that says that if you rebel against us, if you speak out against us, we will not only kill you, but we will kill your story and we will kill any place or mess up any place where you're investing body or bones are. It's a terrible thing. It's nothing more than terrorists. Remember what they did to Nat Turner. All right, they boiled him. All right, they used his skin to make shoes and belts. They broke up his bones and made his bones into instruments. All right, they do these things constantly, and this is a devilish attitude from these people. It's a devilish attitude. All right, but they misunderstand one thing though, and that is the revolutionary spirit of the people, of self-determinism, is not going to let that stop them. As Fred Hampton used to say, you can kill the revolutionary, but you can't kill the revolution. Isn't that right, Malik?
That's right. And Art, to that point, back in the, I would say, for decades upon decades upon decades, the way that we kept and the Black community kept themselves informed on issues were through the reading of books, through panel discussions, through organizations hosting subject matter experts on issues. Today, that is absent of any independent thinking because of the abundance of the overwhelming internet, which people are being informed by largely propaganda. Where do we go from here as we look to educate and inform or raise the level of consciousness of the masses of people that we combine?
Well, we can continue to let these authorities and these authoritarian and exploitive governments miscalculate, because they're going to do that. They're going to keep miscalculating, as we saw yesterday, and even in Venezuela. Even now in Venezuela, you mentioned Delcy Rodriguez has picked up the torch and is essentially saying, hey, I'm the vice president. You got our president, bring him back. And we're not going to do anything. Nobody moves until the president comes back. That's a very powerful position for her to take, and shows how badly Trump miscalculated in this situation. But just briefly touch on the macabre element of this, they blew up the mausoleum of Hugo Chavez yesterday morning. That in and of itself was just a radiantly despicable act, and I just wanted to emphasize that. But they continue to do the things that we expect them to do, and unfortunately, through their own bumbling and their own miscalculations, they will continue to do this. But as you mentioned, worldwide, the groundswell from the people is to defend and to rationalize and to learn from the mistakes and the observations of what these people continue to do. They continue, as if it's standard operating procedure, to operate out of the same playbook, and they go from one disaster to another. And everybody's watching. The youth in this country are very much in attention, and that's why they came out overwhelmingly and voted in New York for Mandami, and essentially are saying, hey, we don't see a problem with socialism. You might see a problem with it, but as far as we're concerned, capitalism and its vestiges aren't trickling down to help us. So we might as well be looking at all options on the table. And that is going to be a growing problem because, again, they miscalculated and miseducated and left that piece off the table. And finally, I will, just say, I mean, I've been to Cuba a number of times. It's definitely a wonderful country and one that I was definitely impressed with. And I see the solidarity and the cohesiveness, the example that Cuba wants to set. It has influenced not only countries like Venezuela, but it's gone throughout Latin America and continues to grow. Whether Rubio and now Trump and anyone else likes it or not, that's going to continue to be the condition. What we need to do, Malik, in response to your question on education, we need to go back to those days when we gathered in small groups, discussion groups, and continue to educate that way, even though we've got social media. Use social media to facilitate those gatherings and bring people together face to face and sit down and talk out. And I people who listen to the Muslim Street, and if you get anything from us that is of value today, please understand that Malik's point is right on. We have to be proactive in education of the people who are around us so that we get accurate, quality information and not just this propaganda that's thrown out by bots on the internet and through social media. So be careful what you listen to. You might get persuaded.
Yeah, so on that point, Dr. White, I just want to take a station break. You listen to The Muslim Street. You can find us at www.themuslimstreet.com. Every Sunday, 12 p.m. Eastern. We'll be right here talking about the hot issues of today. Dr. White, Dr. Conrad Worrell, National Black United Front founding member, and back in 1980, said this. He said that our struggle is for the minds of Black people. All right. Now, in the context of what Art just talked about, I remember when the United States government, through the CIA, overthrew and assassinated Maurice Bishop in Grenada in the early 1980s. I literally had a Negro standing next to me and say, wow, did you see that man down there in Grenada? He was building an airport. He was building a landing strip. Of course, he was building, like, he was the president of the country, right? So this type of ignorance that Art talked about, expanding. Two things I want you to address domestically, Dr. White. The new mayor elect of, actually the mayor now is sworn in the other day of New York, Mandani. He called President Trump yesterday with his disdain about what happened in Venezuela. Now, tomorrow, the Senate will vote and weigh in on this issue that happened in Venezuela. We know we have a Republican-controlled Senate, but I think the question is that I want to ask you, as you running for Congress, will the Congress? Marjorie Taylor Greene came out against it. Where's the CBC, the Congressional Black Caucus, going to line up on this? And I say this to say that at some point they're going to have to take sides, all right, in order to inform the people. What's your point on this?
Well, the CBC, the Congressional Black Caucus, they're not going to take a side as long as they continue to. Well, yeah, they have, and that side is with Israel. All right, they're still taking the money. They're not going to say anything that's going to be definitive, and the rights and the plight of people, Black people in the United States, and in the plight oppressed people around the world. They haven't made a definitive statement in reference to Venezuela, Haiti, Gaza, the Sudan, Sahel, nowhere. So we don't expect nothing. The vote and the discussion in the Senate is nothing more than window dressing. All they're going to do and argue is that why didn't you consult us and to declare war we have to have so many votes. Well, the issue is not about declaring war. It's about the United States violating international rules, international laws. If they're not going there, they're not saying nothing. It is nothing more than an exercise of stupidity and media and TV coverage. So if they're not going to say anything like that, it's not. And since I've been on, I got a couple of emails and people asking, well, what should we do? What should the American people do? Sadly, right now, the oligarchs of the United States, the neocons of the United States, the dark state of the United States are not listening to the people. All right, they're not listening to the MAGA people because the MAGA people don't want international conflict. They wanted an American first agenda. They're not listening to African American people who say we don't want any wars over there because we're the ones who suffer the most. So the only thing that can be done now is for the international community, the leaders in the international world, is to put pressure on Washington. And when I say international world, I'm not even talking about Europe, because Europe now is nothing more than a pet to Washington. We're talking about the African nations, the Middle Eastern nations, the Asian nations, the South American nations. They're the ones who's going to have to use sanctions. They're going to have to use boycotting. They're going to have to use their pressure. Not even the UN, because the UN has become no more than a paper tiger. Because there's one thing that Andrew Jackson stated years ago with the Indian removal policy. And when the Supreme Court came out against him with that, he said, well, they're going to have a way to enforce it. And right now, the UN don't have no way to enforce the laws of international conduct on the United States. So therefore, it has to go outside the UN to force something. So that debate that's going to take place tomorrow, yes, I'm going to listen to it. I'm going to watch it, but I know it's going to mean nothing.
Yeah. And to your point, I mean, when it gets to the House, Jasmine Crockett, who was running for the Senate, weighed in yesterday.
It's a waste.
And what was comical about her remark, it exposes her lack of geopolitical savvy. She literally doesn't understand the world. So she does understand. I can talk anti-Trump. You know,
she's a buffoon.
Yeah. So she comes out and she says, why do we do this? He didn't get congressional approval, meaning the War Powers Act, which they ran right over. That was established during the Nixon administration. But she goes on to say, people, and these are her words, not mine, people can't afford groceries and millions are losing health care. But this is where he's focused. You didn't say that when it came to the billions of dollars. Just even last week, $8 billion more went to Netanyahu and Israel.
Absolutely.
We see hypocrisy.
Anyway. Definitely a lot of hypocrisy when it comes to the Congressional Black Caucus, or what's left of it. I mean, which was a noble institution, at least superficially at one time, but now it is just a collective of politicians who are out for the take. They want to take as much money as they can and stay in the Congress and stay on the take for as long as they can, and the Black community be damned. I mean, so I hope that that situation changes and we get away from collections of politicians and we get leaders. We don't have any leadership in the Black diaspora that is elected to any of these official bodies that can affect any change or even make any statements. And like you were saying, Malik, the AIPAC, Zionist-controlled purse strings who put money into the pocket of every congressional congressional office holder, but more appropriately in even those that are running for office. I mean, they're cramming money into their pockets to sway them to get into office and then be beholden to that one pack. It's sad, but certainly Jasmine and all others. I don't know any of them that don't participate. Would love to hear of one that doesn't. They are fully in the pockets of AIPAC, and of course this Murtado, the woman who won the Nobel Prize.
What a joke.
And she was essentially after, well, these are smart people. Even Jasmine Crockett. I mean, she's a trained lawyer. She's a smart woman. She's certainly, smarter than the average person. But she's got that office, and she's going to maintain that office. Murtado and her receiving the Nobel Peace Prize said, she was asked what was the first thing that she was going to do if she was put in power in Venezuela. And she said, the first thing I'm going to do, the first official act is to move the embassy to Jerusalem. That was her first official act that she would do if she were put in power in Venezuela. So that tells you something about where she perceives the real authority and power to be in this whole game of selling your soul to the devil or to the highest bidder is structurally defined. So, we can't continue to delude ourselves into thinking that this is somehow orchestrated in a practical way. This is really mayhem at its worst, and these people are desperate. One last thing I'll say is the oil certainly is a target of part of what Donald Trump wants to do. He perceives that Exxon was cheated when Chavez took power, and all of the rigging and all of the infrastructure that they came in and claimed that they put in for themselves and their companies was essentially nationalized by the Chavez government. And they want that equipment back. They're saying that they lost money and that they've been ripped off. And there's also very large lithium deposits in the region, and particularly in South America. They need to have a staging area to access that. So that brings in people like Elon Musk, in addition to the oil companies who would back this move if it would be successful. But it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. And I predict in the next couple of weeks we'll see a very strong response from not only the Venezuelan people but the world. And they've got an easy punk to push back on in Donald Trump, because he is so much of a buffoon that the internal operations in this country will turn on him as well. And we'll see certainly an international implosion. So
yeah, Dr. White, any truth to the momentum from Trump and the Western imperialist perspective of taking over Central and South America and their resources? Not only in Venezuela, you have probably 20% of the world's silver reserves in Venezuela, along with the oil. With the co-opting of Her Excellency Cristina Carla Canula and the president of Trinidad, providing material support in reference to the waterways and the airways for something like this to happen. At least that's been going on with Trump sending his military in to shoot down boats over the last month and a half. Do you see any momentum from Trump's perspective that he can win? And then I'll also want to put that in light of the American foreign policy, which is been about resources forever, but particularly in 1990, the early 1990s, with the first Gulf War under President Bush, the daddy, I saw a cartoon 35 years ago, and I remember it. And I want you to respond to all that I'm saying, the momentum, and in this context about what the United States government is really after, because we have to be honest and open with the people. In the cartoon, Dr. White was a cartoon of a little 8-year-old American white boy, blonde hair, blue eyes, standing next to his father, a oil executive in the Middle East. And he was standing in the desert in the Middle East. And the little boy says to his father, "Dad, what is our oil doing running under their sand?"
Yeah.
This is the arrogance of Trump going into Venezuela. He's talking about, this is our oil. All right. So does he have momentum to literally, in light of the co-optation of the president of Trinidad and Tobago, to really pull this off existentially over that the effects could be heard over the next 40 years?
I don't think he has momentum at all. I don't believe that the president of Trinidad and Tobago ever thought about the fact that Mr. Trump would kidnap a head of state. I think that was far removed from their minds. After seeing that, I expect that more countries like Trinidad and Tobago, as well as in other Caribbean nations and throughout the global South, are going to be rushing in to be members of BRICS. And I'm also predict that they're going to be rushing in to develop a counter forces to protect their own sovereignty. What Trump has done, and I shouldn't just say Trump, but what the American hierarchy of the hegemony state has done, is to put everyone on notice that if you don't follow our rules, our laws, you don't follow our narrative, then we will go in and we will dismantle you. So therefore, that's going to cause other countries, other states to put up and to create a strong bulwark, a strong wall against that type of domination. So while he may have won the first round, as you know, as a former fighter, we used to fight 15 rounds. All right. So he may have won the first round, but it's a long fight, and I think you're going to see a whole different change. In fact, about it, I was listening to a diplomat this morning from Africa, and he was warning the African states. Said we have to hurry to develop nuclear weapons. That's
Yes.
the only thing that's going to stop and prevent the United States. And a good sign of that is with North Korea. As much as they've been trying to undermine that country's leadership, they dare not go in, because that man says, if you go in, we got a button and we will use it. And that's the only way you're going to be able to protect your sovereignty now, as long as we have this type of leadership within our country. Unless we get other type of people who who are more civil, who are more understanding, who understand geopolitics, and to realize that we live in a global community that should not be dominated by no one. It's a multinational state that's on this globe. Right now, we don't have anybody in the Oval Office. We don't have anyone in Congress. We don't have anyone in the Senate. We don't have no one at the local levels, state or city or county, who understand these things. Everybody believes in this whole bully American first concept that we should control and dictate and beat up the world. And as long as we have that, we're never going to have said in one of our clips. One day we're going to look up and we're going to see some missiles flying over our head. They can bully so many people for so long.
Yeah, so Dr. White, Dr. Viper Issa White, look for his
So
works over social media. He is running for Congress out of Orlando in the next election. When is the primary, Dr. White, and where can the people find that?
It's in August, the primary. You can go to Dr.
Yeah, you're breaking up that.
IsaForCongress.com, my Facebook. Dr. Isa for Congress, Instagram, on X, on TikTok, at Dr. Vibert Isa
Yeah, yeah, you're
White.
breaking up
I'm on all the
that.
platforms. You can
Yeah,
donate
yeah,
to us.
yeah, Lance, if you could post that, his information of where people can contact Dr. White, donate to his campaign. He is an independent voice, as you can see, in a land of no independent voices. So you should be sticking out like a sore thumb. Everybody goes along with the status quo, and even the opposition is controlled. And then we see this every day. There's no serious mounting toward the attack on white supremacy. Last question I have is for Art. Since 1990, it appeared on the May of 1990. Appeared on the front page of a Sunday edition of the Chicago Tribune, which is the conservative newspaper out of Chicago. With the fall on the behest of the fall of the Soviet Union, the title headline said, "Islam is our new enemy." And we've seen over the last 35 years, the United States march from one country, Muslim country, to the other in terms of this destabilization. Some would like to think, coming out of this onslaught of 35 years, that this shift toward Central and South America spells in to the United States engagement and takeover of the Muslim world. What is your take on that? And we'll close the show out with that.
Well, this is the Muslim street. And when you add to what you just said, the preceding 50 years or 70 or 100 years, African Americans were perceived as the number one threat to national security in the country. So then when you add African Americans and you add in the propensity for African Americans to adopt and accept Islam, you got certainly some real targeted people here in this country who are Black and Muslim. So you got the double whammy going there. But when you look around the globe, and I know that is more to your point, that expands into a much larger audience, but inclusive of a lot of Africans as well. So we have to understand that this is a white supremacist war against people of color, particularly Black people and people of the Muslim faith. But we also know, and we keep saying on the Muslim street, that Muslims and Christians and Buddhists and anyone else for that matter, we know how to get along. We know how to coalesce. We know how to build coalitions and even intermarry. And we do that throughout Africa, and it's on a continuous basis. But these people at the top who want to divide keep running in with these forays about Muslims and Christians being at each other's neck and throat and keep trying to promote those kinds of arguments, and it's not working. It's really not working except in their public pronouncements. And so we have to understand that as we receive that it's just BS, and it's not functional, and it's not what's operating on the ground. I wanted to make one last point about BRICS and the petrodollars. And there is a undercurrent of an idea that that what the U.S. and Donald Trump are really after with this capture of Venezuela and the oil ports is to prevent Russia, China, and other countries from having access to that oil. They want to control not only oil routes, and you see this happening all over the world. They want to control the traffic of oil, because if they can control the traffic of oil and the shipping lanes for oil, then they can reinforce the idea that the dollar is the petrodollar is what has to predominate as the exchange currency when you're dealing with oil. So oil right now is traded in dollars. And if you take that away, Americans are going to feel it. And I'm talking about common folks in America are going to feel that. We in America are going to feel that. But we have to understand that we're part of an international revolution to change this captive force of petro oligarchs and the rest of them, that the hold that they have on us internationally is weakened, and it has
to be up against it, guys. Brothers, just want to close out. Just wanted to list. Art touched on a point about the United States government working feverishly to actually disunite Black people on the ground in the diaspora from the continent. Please read a 1977 and 1978 memo from Zygmunt Brzezinski, a memorandum that he sent to President Jimmy Carter. That memorandum NSC-4D6, where he literally said that the United States government had to work as hard as possible to keep Black Americans and the Black movement away from the burgeoning African movement on the African continent, and they went to work on that. And it is a collateral movement that goes from administration to administration. They're all on the same team. Carter was on the team of Nixon. Nixon was on the team of Lyndon Baines Johnson. Just keep going back and then go forward. They were on the team of Reagan, who was on the team of Bush and Clinton, and then another Bush comes, and then Obama and Biden, and then we have no good Donald Trump. They're all on the same team, and that team is called white hegemony over the planet. I want to thank you for joining us this week. I'm Malik Aziz for Dr. Viper Issa White, as well as Art Mobley of the Darfur 23, produced by the Lance Scurf Show out of West Africa, and particularly Ghana. You can find us at www.themuslimstreet.com. See you next week, and we will talk with you then.